Hello YouTube, it's me Bergie and I'm here with my October wrap up. I know this is super late again. I mean, for all you fellow Americans, this past week was Thanksgiving, or at least while I'm filming this, which by the way, I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I spent time with my family, hence why, even though I did have a video filmed, I did not post it yet. Hopefully that'll be up before you see this, or it definitely will be. But anyway, yeah, I haven't been able to film any of these videos because I was with family. So yeah, I had a great time and I hope you guys had a great time, whatever you were doing for the holidays. Or if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you had a great week. But anyway, October reading wrap up. Let's just get into the general statistics so that way I can get this moving along quite quickly. So in October, I read 7 books, which is pretty decent compared to some of the other months. It's not as good, but it's still up there in number of books. So I read, as usual, all physical copies and 0 ebooks. Anyway, yes, I read all of them in physical copy, none ebooks. 3 were from the library and 4 were books that I owned, which I'm pretty proud of because lately I've been kind of neglecting the books that I own because of the pressure that the library puts on me, so I did read more books that I owned. As for the gender of the authors, I read 3 from male authors and 4 from female authors. Kind of happy because I tend to read more male written books rather than female, so I'm glad that it was the opposite this month. As for genres, I read 1 history nonfiction, 1 suspense, 3 fantasy, 1 thriller, 1 contemporary, and 1 romance. For reading level, I read 5 adult, 1 new adult, 1 YA, and no middle grade. Again, I'm pretty proud of how I've been doing in this category. Usually I read exclusively children's or YA, so I'm kind of getting out of my comfort zone and reading more adult books, which I'm proud of. As for a publishing date, sadly I read 0 from the pre-1800s or the 1800s. I read 1 from the 1900s, 2 from the 2000s, and 4 from the 2010s, so I mostly read more recent books, which I need to be better at diversifying the time period in which I'm reading. For the general ratings, I read 3 5-star books, which is amazing, 0 4-star, 3 3-stars, and 1 2-star. Oh, and 0 1-star. So even though I did read a lot of 5-star books, I also read a lot of mediocre books, so I couldn't win. There was no in between. And then finally, for the total pages read, I read 3,162, which averages about to 102 pages per day, which is not that bad, but again, this is kind of lower than the past couple of months. So yeah, let's just get into the actual books that I read. The first book I read was The Shortest History of Europe by John Hirst. This is a kind of lecture-based nonfiction about, obviously from the title, the history of Europe. And it focuses on 3 main points: on ancient Greek and Roman culture, Christianity from Judaism, and German warrior culture. Now, even though these 3 topics are interesting and what he did inform me of was interesting as well, I feel like it was way too short of a glimpse of European history. Now that being said, what do you expect from a book titled The Shortest History of Europe? But it was an okay introduction to European history. If you want to start somewhere and you don't really know where, I feel like this is a good place to start just to get you introduced. But for someone like me who kind of has this introductory knowledge of European history already down, I wanted a little bit more. But I mean, what can you expect from a book that's again titled The Shortest History of Europe? And I will say it was easy to read, so again, if you do not know anything about European history, this is a great place to start. And I did give it a C-. I didn't really like the lecture style, but again, because it is based on lectures, I can see why it was a bit choppy, because you would be learning this over number of weeks or whatever it be. The second book I read was, I think, my most anticipated read for this entire year, and that was Origin by Dan Brown. This is the 5th book in his Robert Langdon series, and I think this is actually the first book I read right when it came out. All the other books I kind of just picked up on a whim. Well, not really on a whim, but I just picked them up after they were all out for a period of time. But anyway, I just love this book so much. It really did live up to the hype that I was putting up to it. And I think this might have been my favorite because of the way it explores science and religion, which is kind of what Dan Brown does in all of these kind of novels. It's kind of the dichotomy between science and religion. But in this one, unlike his previous novels, he uses modern technology and art to relay that rather than ancient or Renaissance or classical artworks or technologies. In this book, I also really liked how it incorporated relevant issues. Again, when I read the other books, I wasn't reading them right when they came out, so they might have had relevant issues being discussed, but I wouldn't have known it because I was not reading it in the certain circumstances that were happening around when they were written. But in this case, I could tell what issues kind of relate to our time now because I read them in this, what's the word? in this context. Also, something that I really enjoyed was how it broke the fourth wall. Now, if you've read the Robert Langdon series, there are some kind of issues that I understand why people can have with the books, particularly that Robert Langdon is kind of misogynistic, or that the suspense is kind of easy to see, or like it's just not great, not very, or it's very predictable. Anyway, that was kind of nodded to in the book, and I just love the fact that it was kind of brought up because I do not think that he is an actual misogynist. It's just that there are things, it's on a fine line. There's a very thin line between him being a misogynist and not. So I thought that was really nice to kind of acknowledge it and say, no, I'm not really. So yeah, I just like that. And oh my god, there are so many great quotes that you can get from this book. I really did love this book. I gave it an A+. I think this is the highest rating I gave out of all of the Robert Langdon books because it's perfection. If you have not read this series, I highly recommend. And I know that's kind of biased because I love this series, but honestly, it is so good. It's amazing. And this book really does elevate the story more. The third book I read was also a new release this October, I think, yeah. And that was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the third book in the Diviner series that she's written, and as you guys know, I started the series this year. Now let me tell you, with the addition of this book, this series has become one of my favorite of all time. I'm in love with this series. In this book, we kind of see the different diviners that we've been introduced to in the first couple of books come together, and that's all I want to say because otherwise it'll be spoilery. But if you do not know what the series is about, it's about different people with certain supernatural abilities, and it all takes place in 1920s New York, which is just amazing in itself. And I don't know, it's just the way she writes the different relationships between the different characters and just the setting of the scenes, it's just perfect. And the inclusion of different supernatural elements, it's done in as a believable way as you can possibly do with supernatural phenomenon. So I just love it, and I feel like in Before the Devil Breaks You, this third book, we're at the apex of the plot and action. So I feel like the next book that we get, it's just gonna be action, then action and action. It's just gonna be, oh, it's just gonna be amazing. I cannot wait. And I just want to mention in this there are some sexual scenes that I was not expecting, which it doesn't deter me from the book at all. I was unexpected. So I just want to let you guys know, if you are a younger reader reading these books, there are some sexual scenes. Not too bad, not like as heavy as some other books that I'll be talking about later in this video, but there are some. And they are kind of in a 2-chapter span, so it's not really that much. Also, I can't mention a Diviner's book without mentioning how much I love Sam. In this book, my love for him just grows exponentially. It's amazing. I never knew I could love a character this much. Okay, that's a lie. But I didn't realize or think I could love a character this much when I just started reading this series this year. So honestly, this book is amazing. I gave it an A rating. I don't want to give it anything higher until I read what happens next. The next book I read was Carrie by Stephen King because if you guys have seen my fall perspective TBR, I want to read his books every fall season, and I wanted to do it in chronological order, even though I started with The Shining, which is his third published book. So I kind of went back to Carrie, which is his first. Now, going into this, I only knew about that period scene. I didn't know anything else, but yeah. So this book is about a girl who is bullied in high school, and it's like awful. It's kind of the Chocolate Wars kind of bullying, which if you have read that book, you know how fucked up that bullying is. And it's pretty much the same here. Only thing is that the girl being bullied, Carrie, she has telekinetic powers, and she ends up using them to get back at the people who bullied her. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. It was more of, again, like a psychological kind of thing like the Chocolate Wars was. It's more fucked up rather than scary. So if you don't want to get into the scary horror novels of Stephen King, this would be a book for you because it isn't very scary, as I said. However, I will say that the writing style was meh, and that's coming from a place where I know Stephen King books are hyped to all hell. Like, everybody knows who Stephen King is, whether you are a reader or not. So with that in mind, I thought that the writing style in this was kind of meh. That might be because this was his first book and he evolves as he writes. But I mean, it wasn't awful either, so. I did give it a C- though, and I think it was because it wasn't what I expected. It was, oh, again, I should mention, it was written in different snippets from different medias, and then it goes to Carrie's perspective as well. So it kind of goes back and forth, and I don't know if that was necessarily for me. So that's something to keep in mind. The next book I read was You by Caroline Repnes. Now, if you've seen my September wrap-up, my feelings of this book are similar to the other thriller I read then, which was The Girl on the Train. I don't know why these thrillers that I'm picking up have to be so vulgar to, like, for no reason, and that everybody's just crazy. Like, I don't understand it, why this is a common theme with some of the books I've been picking up. All the characters are crazy, and they use extremely vulgar and unneeded terminology. It's just really weird. So anyway, this book is about a stalker who addresses his stalkee as you, so it kind of is supposed to make it feel like you, the reader, are being stalked. It's not as successful as I think it wanted to be, but there you go. Some comments that I want to make is I don't see why the character needed to hate on Dan Brown and the Beastie Boys. As you know, I love Dan Brown's novels, and also I love the Beastie Boys. I think you can see back here. I don't know when I do the pictures and stuff, but I have a Beastie Boys vinyl record, so I love them too. They are like my favorite things, Dan Brown and the Beastie Boys. So I was kind of pissed off that the character in the book was hating on them. It really did not help the fact that I did not like the storyline. So yeah, I gave this a D. So yeah, I really don't think thrillers are my genre, or at least I haven't found a type of thriller that I enjoy. The sixth book I read was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And oh my god, let me tell you, I was not expecting to like this as much as I did. Going into this, I just knew that it had to do with classics. But it is so much more than that. I think the best way to describe this is it's How to Get Away with Murder meets The Raven Boys meets A Separate Piece meets Crime and Punishment. And if that sounds awesome to you, it is. It is so great. I love it so much. And I mean, I guess a lot of other people do, because this is kind of like, this is a modern day classic. So obviously that is warranted because it is such an amazing book. Now, on the classics part of this, it's kind of a cultish classics class, and I just find that so intriguing because I can see how students of the classical civilization could become cultish because it is kind of like a very sophisticated minor group of people who study that, at least in the US. In Europe it is much more popular, but still it has that kind of air of exclusivity, and I think this book capture that beautifully, and it was just amazingly done. One negative is that it is very long. Like, it's a bit long and a bit hard to get yourself reading because it's so long. Like, it's hard to explain. It's just very tiring to read. However, it is a very intriguing plot, and it's very well written, so that kind of pushes you along to get through it because you want to know what happens and you want to see how everything is finished, how the book finishes. So because of that, I gave this an A-. And then the final book I read, I was not planning on reading, but when I came home for Halloween, I just had the desire to pick this up, and I honestly devoured this book. And it is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in A Court of Thorns and Roses series. And I read the first book during the summer when I was reading a whole bunch of popular books on YouTube to see if I liked it. Originally, I was not planning on reading the second book, but I just, for some reason, had the urge to pick up the second book. And I did, and again, I read it in a day or two. I couldn't put it down. And let me tell you, it's not because it is written very well or the story is very original. It's just crack. The story is just crack, in the same way that I guess Twilight was for me when the Twilight craze was going on years ago. And I will say though that this is a little bit more enjoyable than Twilight, but still it has the same kind of crackish feel that you just have to keep on going and just eat up this book. I will say that there are way more explicit sex scenes in this book rather than the first one. And I mentioned this in my September-October library haul, but like I started reading this while I was in the parking lot of an elementary school because I was waiting to pick up my mom who works there. And oh my god, you should have seen how red my face got because I was reading such an explicit sex scene while I was in the parking lot of an elementary school. So like there were little kids walking around the car while I was in it reading this book, and I just felt so dirty. Like I felt just, it was funny because my mom came to the car and was like, "Why the hell is your face red?" And I was like, "There's sex scenes, damn." And she understood because she finished the book series before me. But yeah, I couldn't put this book down. And again, it's not because the story's anything great or the writing's anything great. There's nothing extremely great about the series. It's just that it grips you. It really does. Now, because of that, I gave it a C+, because it was meh for the most part, but because I just had to read it, I gave it a little bit higher than I would have another book that did not grip me as much. But anyway, those are the books that I read in October. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have read any of these books and your thoughts on any of them. I would love to talk to you guys about them, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.